Welcome to the Melted Broadcast. If you have had a UFO sighting, believe or know anyone who has been abducted, or maybe you're an alien hybrid, or you have seen a cryptid animal or the dark paranormal, message me here or email themeltedbroadcast@gmail.com. Let's hear your story. And don't forget, stay melty. I just want to know what's going on.
What's going on?
Like, what's really going on? These government officials came to my house in this black rose. These black suits try to hush me. But I'm not gonna be quiet.
Why?
I'ma speak for the people.
Why did he do it? What was he doing wrong?
I promise you, we come in peace.
Answers need to be questioned. And questions need to be answered.
I am an alien. I come from across your galaxy to bring you here. Too bad, so sad, you are mine.
I just need you to trust me one time. I promise, if you trust me, we're all gonna stay melted.
What's going on, everyone? This is Tony Mars with the Melted Broadcast. Today's guest, Parsi from Australia, a childhood and lifelong experiencer from a very small minority of Persians. Aspect of the phenomenon he's experienced are close-up sightings, contact with orbs and spirits, past lives as two species of NHI, and current soul life as an avian NHI. He's seeking to gain understanding and support from fellow experiencers and to destigmatize this topic. Welcome to the conversation, Parsi.
Thank you so much, Melted Broadcast.
It's good to have you, Parsi.
Thank you.
So, tell us a little background about you, where you grew up.
Yeah, sure. So, I was born in Mumbai, India. I belong to a minority of people called the Parsis that sort of moved over from Iran like 3,000 years ago to get away from persecution. They were asked to convert to Muslim, and they decided to kind of disperse all over the world. So growing up, we grew up in a very strict religious household. So Parsis follow a religion called Zoroastrianism. Not sure if you've heard of it.
Yes,
But at the moment,
I definitely have.
there's only about 50,000 of us left in the world. So I'm sure I'm not the only Parsi experiencer out there, hence the name Parsi X.
Okay.
So I think for me, the relationship with the phenomenon started with, since me and my twin brother. We were 11 years old, and we lived in a 6-story apartment building, and we were on the 3rd floor. So if you can imagine, the layout of this apartment was a long kind of like a rectangle going up and down.
Yeah.
And on the right side of this rectangle is what's called like a wraparound balcony. So I was in my room playing, with my He-Man and G.I. Joe toys, as embarrassing as that sounds for an 11-year-old.
Nah.
My first point of experience was basically hearing this deep hum. So I heard a hum unlike anything that I've experienced. So it wasn't a plane or a helicopter. It just had this really deep, kind of weird way to describe it. It was like a wah, 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 wah. And I was really kind of intrigued. And I'm like, what's this noise? And then something told me in my heart, you need to go outside. So I went outside. And about I would say being on the third floor, so another 3 or 4 levels up in the sky was an egg-shaped craft. And this craft, if you look on my feed on Twitter, it's my pinned post, and I'll get to that in a bit, is it had these lights on the edges of the craft, so red, green, and blue lights. And what was probably only about a 10-minute experience felt like an hour. It's almost like time froze. So this craft is hovering up, and I'm like, how come nobody else is seeing this? And then the weirdest thing happens is in the middle of the craft, what looks like a yellow window or a portal opens up, and a 3-fingered hand, like a really pudgy little hand, starts waving.
Okay.
So I'm like, okay, this hand's waving. I'm going to wave back at it. I felt really peaceful and happy on the inside. And I'm like, I'm not sure what I'm experiencing now. We had no points of reference to what a UFO or an alien was. This is back in 1991, and I'm only 11 years old. Then the craft is sort of floating in midair. It decides to move to the right. So now when it's moving to the right, I'm thinking to myself, hey, I can catch this thing on the wraparound balcony. So I quickly run out of my room. I go out on the wraparound balcony, and my attention doesn't go to the craft. It goes to my brother, who's standing on the edge of the balcony with his hand up waving. So I'm in shock. So I'm looking at him and I'm going, hey, what are you waving at? And he's like, oh, you don't see that thing up there? And I'm like, yeah, I saw it on in the room balcony. So the hand is still waving at my brother, and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna join on the waving, as crazy as that sounds. So we're both waving at this thing, and it ends up sort of flying off into the distance, into the clouds. And me and my brother are buzzing, and like we had no exposure to aliens, UFOs, anything paranormal. We may have seen probably a show on TV or a cartoon once.
Yeah.
So that was our only point of reference. So then we run to our mom and we're like, hey, mom, I think we saw a UFO. And my mom is like, oh, you guys are full of shit, kids with imaginations.
Yeah.
So in my mom's wisdom, she said, okay, whatever you've seen, you need to draw that. So she put us in 2 separate rooms. And then we came back to her with our drawings, her illustrations. So if you're on my Twitter page and you look at that pinned post, my illustration is the one at the top that looks like it's in daylight. And my brother's is the one that's more kind of accurate, where it's nighttime. And you will see that 99.9% it looks the same.
Yeah,
so then my mom had
they're super
shock.
identical.
My mom just drops the pieces of paper. She's pretty much in shock. She's like, yeah, maybe you saw something. Sorry, excuse me.
No, you're good.
Then after that experience, I started experiencing the phenomena in the form of orbs. So I would probably end up eating dinner around 7, 8 p.m. And I would have this sudden urge to head out on the wraparound balcony. So I'd head out on the balcony, and it usually used to be around dusk time or just when it turns nighttime. And I would start seeing a couple of these stars that are really low in the distance, and the stars would be moving. And I thought it was my imagination. So I'd had this urge to walk on the balcony. So it's just walking in a straight line after dinner. And then one day I decided to ask this star, and I'm like, if you can hear me, can you move right? And it moves right. And then I get really afraid. And then I'm like, okay, well, did that just happen, or is it my imagination? So I said, okay, if you can hear me, can you move left? And it moves left. And that's when it really freaks me out. And I'm like, this is some demonic crap. Might be some spirits or something. I'm going to stop cold turkey thinking about this or worrying about this. So then that was when I was 11 years old. I've moved around quite a bit. So I ended up moving to New Zealand for a few years when I was in my teenage years. And I can't really think of anything. I may have had sleep paralysis here and there. And then we ended up moving to Australia for a little while. And in Australia, another facet of the phenomenon started. I remember the day we bought this house from a family. And the family, I remember, was a gentleman that was a rabbi. So he was dressed in his full garb with his sideburns and his cap, like a black overall coat. I remember his wife. She was dressed really simple, and she had a little baby in her arms. And that's all I remember about them. They hand over the keys. We take over the house. A few months later, I'm in my bedroom, and I'm sleeping in my bedroom. And I'm always with my twin brother. So he sleeps on one king bed on the right. I'm on the left. I wake up about 1 a.m, and the physical sensation is someone being in your space. Like, if you're on public transport and someone's right up in your face and you're like, whoa, like,
Yeah.
get away from me, that
Yeah.
kind of sensation. So I open my eyes and I shit you not, what looks like the outline of 3 people standing at the edge of my bed. Now, the outline I can only describe as a golden hue, like a golden color.
Mm-hmm.
And it looked like the outline of this rabbi. So I could see the detail of his sideburns. I could see his hat. I could see the wife standing next to him with the baby. And I'm freaking out. I'm thinking, oh my God, why am I seeing ghosts now? And I start praying. Being born into this religion of Zoroastrianism, it preaches good thoughts, good words, good deeds. And I was never really into religion ever since I was a child. But I started praying. I was like, oh my God, there's ghosts coming here, there's spirits coming here. So I started praying and I'm like, you're in my space. I was speaking to them very respectfully. I'm like, can you please leave because you're in the wrong place. I closed my eyes, opened my eyes. They're still there. They're literally there for like about 15, 20 minutes.
Oh, wow.
Now, eventually they leave and I'm completely shaken. So pretty much didn't sleep the whole night. Woke up the next morning, tell my mom, hey mom, I saw the spirits of these people in our house. And my mom's like, what could it be? They may have passed over and they've come back to the house that they lived in. And I'm like, yeah, I mean, we never really know, right? So I asked my brother, I said, hey, did you see anything last night? And he seemed really disturbed. He's like, I'm not ready to speak to you yet. So then I pestered him for a few days. And then 3 days later, I'm like, come on, tell me, what did you see in the room? Like, without me telling him what I saw. So he's like, I opened my eyes around 2 a.m. And this is, remember I said it was about 1 a.m. because I looked at the clock in the room. He says, I wake up and in the dark, I can see what he perceived to be a giant winged bat, or what looked like a bat, or he described as a gargoyle.
Oh, damn.
All black with red eyes sitting on my chest. As crazy as that sounds. So I'm like, you saw what? And he says, yeah, it looked like a giant bat that was sitting on your chest. And he says that the minute he opened his eyes and looked at the creature recognized that someone was looking at it and noticed it. So they lock eyes and the creature was angry. A few minutes later, the creature still sat on my chest, spread its wings. It had a really big wingspan. And he says it flew off. And I'm like, what do you mean it flew off? So he's like, yeah, it was actually there. It was sitting on your chest. And then it flew off. And I'm like, wow, okay. I'm like, that's not what I saw. And I'm like, did you see anything else? And he goes, yeah. And I'm like, what else did you see? And he goes, oh, there were 3 people at the edge of your bed protecting you. And I'm like, protecting me?
What?
I'm like, how do you know that they were protecting me? And he goes, well, this thing was sucking on your energy. And I'm like, for someone that had no idea what, negative entities were, what, sucking the energy, this is the words coming out of my brother's mouth at the age of 19 or 20. And he goes, this thing was sucking your energy. And these beings that were at the edge of your bed, the spirits were basically your protectors. They were protecting you from this thing doing what it was meant to be doing. So it didn't fly off because he saw the being. It flew off because it realized that there are these people that are at the edge of the bed protecting me. And I was like, oh my God, this is just too crazy to comprehend. After that, I started getting a ton of sleep paralysis. I would literally wake up, my eyes would be awake, and what looked like a really tall, thin person with large black eyes looking back at me from the side of my face. They had really thin, kind of wispy hair. I guess if you were to have a point of reference, like a hybrid child, like a hybrid gray child, but a really tall one, just looking at me. And it would freak me out because I'm like, oh my God, like there's nothing I can do, but just I'm paralyzed.
Yeah.
And that's all I'm seeing. So then eventually it would go away. So that was kind of in my 20s with the sleep paralysis. I moved to Canada for about 10 years. Nothing really happened. And then I moved back to Australia about a few years ago. And things started really ramping up. I had a surgery. So I had this weight loss surgery. And I lost about 60 kilos, which is about 120 pounds, I guess, give or take.
Okay.
And as I started losing the weight, I started getting these bizarre physical symptoms. So I started feeling pressure in my third eye, in that third eye region. I started perceiving a glow around my fingers, like a golden glow, which I'm assuming is my aura. So I can see my aura, and I can see it in the light or the dark. I started feeling the energies of people around me. So if someone is not being honest or deceitful, I start feeling pain in my solar plexus region. So all these crazy symptoms started happening. So I joined this forum called Project Avalon. Now, there used to be a website, or still is, called Project Camelot with Carrie Cassidy and Bill Ryan. So they started this forum for whistleblowers and stuff. So in my 20s and 30s, I was just fascinated by the whole phenomenon. You know, what could it be? You know, so there were all these whistleblowers coming out, kids coming out saying I'm a starseed from Mars or whatever. You know? So I would take it with a grain of salt. Really use my discretion. I wouldn't go into being a conspiracy nut. So I joined this Project Avalon forum. So Bill Ryan and Carrie Cassidy went their separate ways. Bill Ryan made a forum called Project Avalon, and I started posting my experiences on there. And people said, "Oh, you're having this thing called a Kundalini awakening."
Yeah.
So I'm like, okay, great. Well, what do I do with this Kundalini awakening? And they said it's a form of a spiritual awakening. So then I started meditating to get rid of that pressure in my third eye region. And I'm like, okay, you know what? I'm going to start meditating. As soon as I started meditating, a whole bunch of crazy synchronicities started happening. I would see repeating numbers, 11, 11, 12, 12, 21, 21. I would see them on my phone. I'd see them on drivers. Like if I'm driving, I'd see a license plate with 777.
Yeah.
The industry that I work in, we send out security codes to people that we speak to, like MFA, multi-factor authentication. Now, I don't understand how, but I send out a multi-factor authentication code for the person to read out, and they would be like 525-777. I'm like, what the fuck's going on?
Yeah.
People would call me, random people, like customers that would call me when I'm working, and their number would end in 2121-777. I don't know if I was just reading too much into it, but it nonstop happened. The next synchronicity that happened was having been through a lot of past trauma in this human incarnation. I was obsessed with self-healing and being able to get over the trauma. And I found kind of reaching out to psychologists and stuff was a waste of money because they would hear you, but they can't really do anything for you.
Yeah.
So a guy named Eckhart Tolle, Eckhart Tolle, he came up in my Facebook feed, and he has this thing called Power of Now. Power of Now is basically a concept that we're kind of, we live in the past. We always worry, we go over the past and we worry about the future. We never live in the present, in the moment of gratitude. So I started reading up on his book, and one thing led to another. On my Facebook feed and Twitter and everywhere, this guy named Joe Dispenza popped up, you know, Rewired by Joe Dispenza on Gaia TV, which I don't have. But I was intrigued because he was speaking about self-healing through meditation. So I started doing Joe Dispenza's meditations, self-healing meditations. After I started doing the meditations, I found out about a thing called a QHHT regression session, which is basically like a hypnosis session where you delve into your past lives. So I said, okay, well, I'm really curious. I'm really searching for answers. Why did we see the craft? Why did I have the experience with the spirits? Why did I have sleep paralysis? So I picked a random person from Google, and I went off here to see her in Melbourne. When I went off to see this person, another symptom of this spiritual awakening started happening. Like right off the bat, my hands started buzzing with energy, like crazy energy. the person that I was speaking to, her face started physically changing, and I'm like, oh my god, why is your face changing?
Yeah.
And she goes, that happens when you're starting to build positive energies and when you start becoming psychic. So I'm not actually seeing a physical face change, I'm seeing her energy body coming out. So then the regression session started, and it's very important for people that are listening to know that I had no idea of any kind of race of aliens or NHI. The only beings that I kind of knew about from pop culture and Whitley Strieber were like the Greys, the classic Greys with the eyes. So now this regression session starts. And the regression session starts, and I see myself floating over like a purple city, purple skies. And then from a bird's eye view, I see a crystalline pyramid, like a see-through pyramid, and I'm going through the pyramid. And when I'm talking about myself, I'm saying I'm a being of light. I'm just the soul that's coming through, or I perceive to be my soul. So I'm coming through this pyramid, and I see other beings of light going from the bottom of the pyramid, going outwards towards the sky. So all of a sudden, in my mind's eye, I see what looks like a tall female gray alien. Her face looked like a gray, but her eyes, I'll never forget, were in black. They looked like they were really elongated, and they had pink and purple swirls. Like if you were to put oil on water and look at the oil reflecting off the water in the light,
Okay.
that's what her eyes looked like. And a word formed above her head, which is the word Lyra. And I'm like, what's Lyra? And then she says, I'm your Lyran mother. And I'm like, okay.
What?
And she's like, this is where you were born. And I'm like, what do you mean this is where I was born? And she's like, this is where your soul was born, on Lyra. Okay, now she doesn't specify what planet, she just says Lyra. So I'm feeling like I'm in a blissful state, and this whole session's going really well. And I'm like, well, what are these other lights that are going upwards? And she's like, these are where the souls are born, and they're going to wherever they need to incarnate. Then all of a sudden, the memory goes blank, and with my eyes closed, I lift my hands up, and I can feel my hands raising to my eyes, and I can look at my hands, and they're human hands, and the human hands, they morph into green, scaly, thick hands with sharp claws. And that's when I start hyperventilating in my session, and I'm like, I'm not sure what's going on. So my regression therapist says, okay, so who are you? Where are you from? What are you doing here? And my voice changes, and my voice says, we are Siakar. I'm Ruck from Alpha Draconis. And I'm like, what the fuck is Ruck from? What the fuck is Ruck from Alpha Draconis? And she asks again, where are you from? And he goes, we are from Alpha Draconis. We are Siakar. And he says it with a growl. And then I'm hyperventilating. I'm like, I don't know what the hell's going on. Who is this being? What's happening? Now, in my childhood, I used to have a recurring nightmare with, if you can imagine, a wooden door with two flames on either side of the door. And every time I'm at that door, I wake up because I'm really scared of going through that door. Now, I'm looking at the reptilian hands, right, which I ascertained were reptilian hands, and that was me in a past life. So I'm looking at the hands, and that door appears. And I use one of my hands, and I push that door open. Oh, this is really hard for me to speak about because, sorry about this. I'm getting a bit emotional.
No, you're good, man. Just take your time.
And I never knew any of this stuff before the regression, is that when I go through that door, the door that I'm always seeing in my nightmares, is I see the reptilians feeding. So they're feeding on every kind of life form. They're feeding on different animals, different beings. They're feeding on humans. They're feeding on children. And then I join in on the feeding. Sorry.
No, you're good, man. Just take your time.
And now I'm feeding on the humans, and they're feeding viciously. They're voracious. They're just eating and eating. and mindlessly eating. The next memory, I find myself as this reptilian being on his spaceship, or what I'm perceiving to be his spaceship. And he's standing with his arm against the spaceship and he's looking out at the stars. And I've drawn all these illustrations, which I can send to you as well. So that's the moment this reptilian being. So what's happening is that when this reptilian is consuming humans and consuming these other life forms, he starts developing empathy for the humans. He starts developing his soul. A soul, like these reptilians don't have a soul. Greys, reptilians don't have a soul. At least that's my perception of what's happening.
Okay.
So this reptilian starts developing that soul, coming in. He must have potentially, I'm thinking he may have eaten the Lyran being that I was, right? And
Oh wow.
he started developing the soul. Now, the next memory that I get right away is that I'm lying on a gurney in my reptilian form. I can see my clawed feet. I can see what looks like I'm perceiving to be either a spacecraft or some kind of room where it's all gray ceilings. There's these purple lights running on either side, like little thin lights in a line, so it's like a straight line. And I feel like my body's being pushed on this gurney into a room. All of a sudden, I start feeling pressure on my in my temples, and I start hyperventilating. I asked the regression therapist Joe, I'm like, I don't know what's happening. She's like, look around, tell me what you see. At first, it's black, but then I tilt my head backwards and I see a short gray, or what I perceive to be a short gray, working on my temples. So he had his little hands on the sides of my temples, and I can feel the physical pressure in my temples. Now, I don't know what's happening. And then I look around, I look past my feet, and all of a sudden I see what I perceive to be two tall grays on either side of my legs, right? I see a really tall reptilian, like a really muscular reptilian in the middle, laughing and smirking, the worst evil laugh and smile on his face. And he looks angry. And right behind them is a tall insect like being who's just, who comes off as probably supervising this procedure, wearing like a purple cape, which then I found out was a mantid being. So now I'm panicking. I'm not sure what's going on. All of a sudden, my body starts convulsing, and I see a white light from my chest being ripped out. That's coming out of my chest and being put into a glass, what looks like a glass container. So this to me is looking like they were taking out that soul. They were doing like a soul transfer procedure.
Mm-hmm.
So they take out the soul, they put it in a glass container, and that's where that image ends. Then the rest of the regression, I'm asking, why did they do this to me? And my higher self tells me that what they've actually done is they've taken out the soul because greys and reptilians, they can't afford, like reptilians can't afford to start having emotions and having a soul. It's really convoluted information. Is because they find it like a disease. If every one of them starts having a soul, developing a soul, it goes against their plan and their agenda.
Okay.
I'm like, wow. And then I asked myself, but why did I go through this? Why are you showing me a life as a Lyran and a reptilian? And then my higher self says, look, the soul is actually, it's always eternal. It can never end. There's no beginning, there's no end. But the soul needs to be on a journey. So when I incarnated as a Lyran, I only knew goodness, peace, and prosperity, but I never appreciated it. For the soul to appreciate the goodness, you have to go through the bad. Remember, good and bad are human constructs.
Yeah.
Malevolence,
Right.
benevolence.
Yeah.
It's what we perceive that to be. So then my soul had to learn as a reptilian, feeding on the humans. Humans see the reptilians as malevolent because they're slightly higher on the food chain. They have more abilities than us, psychic abilities, but they technically don't have a soul. Um, So my soul had to experience that life, the yin and yang aspects. And then I said, okay, then why was I reincarnated as a human? So the higher self says that, look, when you're a human, you then have a choice. You have free will to decide whether you want to choose a good path or an evil path. Like, you can help people, you can volunteer, you can be kind to people, or you can be a murderer, rapist. You know what I'm trying to say, what I'm
Yeah,
trying to get
yeah,
at.
for sure.
So then I ended up saying, look, you know what? I've always been a good person. I choose the light, and this is what I'm gonna do with this life. Is I'm gonna choose the good side. And then all of a sudden, my regression kind of went crazy, and I started telling the lady that um, the reptilian agenda is always out there in your media, in your movies,
Oh yeah.
and fucking the craziest thing I said, look up a movie called Jupiter Ascending, and I'm like, why
Oh
is that
yeah.
coming up? Right?
Yep.
And I started telling the lady, look, you want to know what's happening on Earth? It's right in your face. Off-world humans colliding with draconian reptilians, working with their little gray minions. And I said, this movie made fun of the reptilians. They made us look like second-class citizens, but we are the ones in control. We are Siakar. That's what I said.
Yeah.
And then I said something really stupid. I said, there's two humans that know our agenda. One is Elena Danan, of all people, that comes up in my regression. And lo and behold, after the regression, I go and I look at Elena Danan's videos, and she's talking about the Siakar. I'm like, how the fuck did that happen? So this voice is saying, like, we're watching her very closely because she knows part of the truth of what we are, what our agenda is. And then I threaten the poor lady, the regression therapist, and I say, if you divulge our agenda to anyone, we will kill you. Just right off the bat, I said it, rolled off my
What?
tongue. But she
Okay.
was freaked the fuck out. She's like, oh my God. So ended up being a 5-hour session, and I'm like, I tell the lady, I'm like, I don't know what the fuck just happened. I'm really disturbed by all this. Can we do another one? And she was politely telling me, yeah, we can do another one maybe in a year or so, which is like her way of saying thanks,
Yeah.
but no thank you.
Yep.
So now I'm trying to make sense of all this information that came through after this session. She said that when you go home, you're going to feel sick. You're going to feel physically sick because all this information is coming out. And I didn't believe her. I go home, I vomit, my eyes turn red. It's like I'm having an allergic reaction. I ended up having a fever. I was in bed for one day. Literally, just a couple of hours after the regression, this starts happening. A few days later, I start feeling dizzy. It's about a Sunday morning. My wife's making pancakes. I'm sitting on the sofa, start feeling dizzy, and I start hearing a voice. And the voice starts saying, remember who you are. Remember who you are. And I'm like, who are you? What are you trying to tell me? And then the voice gets really loud and it says, remember who you are. Draconis, remember who you are. And I'm like, get out
What?
of my head. I don't want you in my head. Like, leave me now. And then my hand starts shaking, and I tell my wife, give me a notepad. Like, really, just give me a notepad. And I don't know what's happening to me. So my hand starts shaking, and I write the word Draconis in like a stylized font. And then I start writing alien language. And I draw a symbol that looks like a triangle with a little eye in the middle. And I'll put all these up on my X page, but just remind me and I'll send them to you.
Yeah, for sure.
So after I draw the page with the symbols, my hand's still shaking. I move on to the next page. And I start drawing what looks like an eye, like a reptilian eye, because every time I close my eye, I see these two reptilian eyes staring back at me. So I draw an eye, and I end up drawing the entire eyeball of the reptilian. Then all of a sudden, I flip the page, and my hand's compelled again to start drawing. Draws the outline, what looks like a mouth with teeth. My hand starts drawing the eyes. My hand starts drawing the ridge, the ridge on the head of the being, the scales, the eyes, and then my hand stops, and I'm looking at the picture, and this is the face of the reptilian being that I was. I ended up drawing the entire face of the being.
Okay.
After that happened, um, I'm like, you know what? I need to go meditate because this is driving me crazy. So I go meditate for about an hour or so. I'm walking back from the meditation, and whatever this reptilian presence is, it's kind of fucking with me. It says, look down. I look down on the ground, and there's a piece of bark. Now, bark just looks like bark, right? Like you have pieces of bark on the ground
Yeah.
that's fallen off a tree. There's a piece of bark that looks like the reptilian eye. And I look
No
straight at it, and
way.
I pick it up in my hands, and I'm like, oh my God, I still have this piece of bark in my house. I've taken photographs of it, and it looks literally like an eye, like the slit that goes up to down, the
Yeah.
black slit.
Yep.
And I'm like, this something's really fucking with me. I need to stop thinking about this. So I'm reaching out to people. I start off like an account on X under Parsi X before Twitter became X, and then
Yeah.
for myself Parsi X on there. Started reaching out to experiencers. Started speaking to a lady by the name of Fringe Think on there, and I said, "Look, Fringe, I've got all these crazy experiences," and she really helped me kind of come out on spaces to say my story up to that point. So that was up to that point. Was that first regression was last year, and I was really disturbed by it because I'm like, I still don't have answers of what's happening.
Yeah. And I
So
have a
then I started,
question. So
yeah,
these
yeah,
these past life regressions, I know you're in a hypnotic state. Is it like you just like you're under hypnosis and you're speaking out loud, or like in your
yeah,
mind do
yeah,
you see like actual like visions in your head?
yeah. You see the you see it like you're there. You see the and you know what? I'm one of those.
Interesting.
I'm really skeptical about everything. I was like, nah, there's no fucking way someone's gonna, hypnotize me. But literally,
Yeah.
so this lady said, look, you won't know that you're being hypnotized. You'll be in a very relaxed state, but your body will need to function. So she said that you will be in a regression and you may need to go to the toilet. In the middle of the regression, I actually said, this body
What?
needs
No
to go to the
way.
toilet. I remember waking up out of the regression. I'm still in the regression state. I take a pee, I come back, I lie down, bang. In 2 seconds, I'm back in that state.
What?
And it's all on the 5 hour tape. So the thing is, then after the regression, I have these images in my head, so I start writing down the transcript of everything I know. Now, if you go to a website called Project Avalon Forum, if you go to Project Avalon Forum and you join up, there is you can search for me under Parsi_X, and I put up the pictures, all the illustrations of the Lyran eyes and the reptilian eyes. So if you want, one of you want to perhaps just log in right now and have a look at that. I've made a thread called "A Soul's Journey from Lyra to Alpha Dracon." From Lyra to Terra via
Okay.
Alpha Draconis. Okay, so then the regression session finishes. Now, my twin brother, who's also an experiencer, doesn't really share his stories, but when he shares the stories, the bombs he drops, I'm like, fuck. Even being an experiencer, I find it hard to believe him because of the stuff that's coming out of his mouth.
Yeah.
So he tells me, so he lives in a state called Queensland, and I live in Melbourne, Victoria.
Okay.
So this is all happening. So after so about March 2022. So he tells me, look, hey, I'm gonna send you some pictures on WhatsApp. You tell me what you think. So he sends me 3-4 pictures of the night sky, he's getting off the bus, and it just looks like a street view with a street lamp, and there's a purple sky, and you can literally see 4 or 5 plasma craft, what looks like plasma craft, and they are almost like the shape of the stuff that we saw when we were kids, but they look white, so they look like little eyeballs, right, floating about in the sky. And then he sends me another picture, and I drop my phone in shock. So there's a close up of the craft. And you can see the whole craft. It looks like the shape of an eyeball, and it's all white. And I was like, holy fuck, that is the craft that we saw as kids. And I'm like, when did you take these? And he goes, oh, I took them in January. So he was getting off the bus from work, and something tells him to look up in the sky, and he just randomly takes these photographs of these multiple craft. And in one photograph, you can see the craft just on the side. Plain as day, you can see the craft.
Yeah.
And he's like, what are you guys doing? What's happening? And he goes, we are with you always. We're always watching over you.
What?
And then I'm like, did you find out who was up in the craft, and he goes, "Oh yeah, it's like our grandparents and our aunt that passed away from COVID. It's their spirits up in a craft." And I'm like, "Oh, okay." I'm like, I mean, even after my crazy experiences, like I found it really hard to believe that. Like I'm like, okay, fair enough. That's what you experienced. That's your truth. I'm not gonna belittle you on that. So then basically after that, I'm like, I'm struggling with this information. I'm on this Project Avalon forum. I'm putting up my photographs and my illustrations, but I'm not getting a lot of answers. On X, I'm kind of speaking about stuff. And then I decided just last week to reach out to a regression therapist called Mary Rodwell. So Mary is based in Australia, and she's helped over 3,000 people, especially children that claim that they are, from different planets or different star systems, like star seeds. I hate that term, but that's what she uses.
Yeah.
So I ended up, actually, sorry, let me back up a little bit. So, sorry about this.
No, you're good.
So trying to get rid of that reptilian attachment, I was doing these Joe Dispenza meditations. So two things started happening. So the first thing with the Joe Dispenza meditation was a being that looked like an owl popped up in my head. So the eyes popped up and then the whole face. And then I drew the entire owl being. So this being is basically, it's got a face of an owl, but it's got the body of a man, and it's in a golden armor, like a golden shining armor, and it's pointing at what looks like the sun. Okay, and I'll get back to you in a minute. And I was like, what is that message that's coming across? Why is it pointing at the sun? So after I had that meditation and that contact with this owl NHI, the next day, me and my wife go off to an antique store. And for 3 hours, all we see is photographs of owls, little figurines of owls. And I'm like, holy shit, I'm telling my wife, I'm not going crazy. The signs are everywhere. So I started taking pictures to document all this evidence that's happening to me. So then I reached out to a guy named Mike Clellan, who's written a book about owls and synchronicity and its relationship to the phenomenon. And it's speculation that owls are like kind of a screen memory if you're abducted or if you're in contact with NHI, so to speak. So then I constantly meditate, and I'm constantly given this image of this being standing in a gold outfit, and he's got like a golden kind of a weapon in his hand, a golden rod. And he says his name is Abraxas. I am Abraxas. That's what he says. My name is. So then I'm like, okay. I'm still meditating, and I meditate out on my balcony in my apartment. And I start looking up at the stars at Orion's Belt, the constellation.
Yeah.
And something bizarre starts happening. I start seeing orbs around that area. So they'll start forming. They first come as flashes. Then they'll start streaking across the sky, and they remind me of the orbs that I'd seen as a child. So at first I'm like, no, this is probably got to be a satellite or something, right? I'm trying to be really rational in my thought process. So then I start seeing them regularly. So they start coming up in the sky as soon as I'm out on the balcony. So I don't even need to meditate. And I've videoed a whole bunch of them. I've taken photographs of orange, yellow, red orbs. I've got a photograph of an orange orb that I zoomed in on, and it's got the face of an alien, like a gray alien with the eyes and the mouth.
Well, we're actually
And
looking
it's
at
all up on
we're looking at some of your pictures right now on the X, literally of that.
Yeah, and you can even see the videos I take on my shitty iPhone 13, so you can see the orbs flying by. And then I told the orbs, like, I'm not into CE5 or heist because I don't really encourage it. You never know what you can bring in, but this is just happening to me. Like, I can't control it. So then I'm thinking, hey, remember when you were a kid, you told the orb to go left and right? So I visualized in my mind, and I said, hey, can I get one of you to cross another one? And they fucking cross enough. Like, one crosses the other one. So if you can visualize a star, another one goes from left to right, and the one that looks like a star then moves to the right. I was like, holy shit. And I've got a video of that. And you'll see that in my feed somewhere, one of the videos.
Yeah,
So, so the byproduct of doing these Joe Dispenza healing meditations, Walk for the World, is it puts me in a state that I call brain and heart coherence. So my heart rate slows down, I almost feel like fuzzy in my head, like my brain really calms down. And all I'm doing is projecting love and gratitude for being in this life. And something is responding back to me. So then I was like, okay, I'm still searching for answers. I said, okay, I'm going to reach out to Mary Rodwell, right? And see how this regression goes. And I was like, oh, fuck, do another regression. And then I start finding out more of this reptilian shit. I'm going to lose my mind. So Mary's regression is not QHHT, which is past life. It's more focusing on the now, on what happens now. So she said, look, you have a choice. You can speak about your past lives or you can speak about now. And I'm like, let's focus on the now. So almost immediately, and I've got a video recording of this regression, is almost immediately I go into a trance-like state. I'm taken to what looks like a grassy field. I'm in the grassy field, and lo and behold, a mantid being shows up. So I've used AI to generate what I've seen in my mind's eye, and I popped it up on my Twitter feed. So if you find any of those mantid photos or search for the all ALL in any of my photos, you'll see what I'm trying to say. You can visualize what I'm looking at. Okay. So this mantid shows up, and we're in a field, and I'm looking up at the stars. I'm looking up at Orion's belt, and I'm saying, why are we here? So the mantid is what I perceive to be really, really old, like ancient. He's got like a walking stick. So one of his hands is leaning on a walking stick. He puts one of his hands on my heart. And then with his other hand, he points to Orion's belt. And when he points to Orion's belt and I'm looking up, a star flashes. The star starts descending. The star becomes a golden triangular craft that lands in the field. Now from this golden triangular craft, out come 3 owl-headed NHI in golden armor. Remember I was telling you about that guy that comes through Abraxas?
Yeah.
So it was him and 2 other owl NHI. They come out of the craft and they come up to me and he puts his hand out and he says, come with me. So I don't hesitate. I take his hand and I go up in the craft. Now, and I'm like, where are you taking me? Are we going up to a planet? And he says, you'll see. So at that moment in the regression, I am completely in a state of peace, in a state of bliss. I haven't felt this close. I would say I haven't felt this much love and happiness before. So I don't know if they're trying to manipulate me, but that was the feeling that I had. So we fly into space and we go through what I'm perceiving to be the sun. It looks like the sun. So if you can imagine a sun. Mm-hmm. When we go through the sun, I feel like I'm complete, like this sensation of completeness, of love, of gratitude, like I've never felt before. And I said, oh, did you fly us to the sun? Where are we? And he goes, no, we are not in the sun. He says, you are, and we are all. So he says, you are a part of us. We are all fractals of source. And we are at the all, ALL. And I'm like, what do you mean the all? And he says, in your words, the all is what you call God or the source. And I was like, wow. I'm like, okay. And I'm like, so what is your purpose of bringing me here? And that's where it kind of comes full circle with the previous regression. So he says that in this incarnation, you are one of us. We are the keepers of the souls. We are the guardians of the souls. And I'm like, what do you mean by that? And he goes, we are fighting a battle against a bunch of species. So he said, greys, reptilians, from implementing their agenda on Earth. And I'm like, what is their agenda? And he goes, reptilians and greys don't really have a soul. Reptilians want to live in this plane of existence, but they can't live in this plane of existence on Earth in their form. Same with the greys. So their agenda is to build hybrids upon their craft, but you can't simply put a hybrid down on Earth and expect it to function. It needs a soul.
Right.
So that's where they end up stealing the souls of people that they abduct. Sometimes people go missing, you never hear from them.
Right.
And so this being tells me that they are the opposing side that stops them from doing this. And he says it's a battle for the soul.
Yeah.
And I was like, fuck. I was like, wow. And you can take this all with a grain of salt, take it or leave it. I mean, use your discernment, but it makes sense to me, because if there is one side, there is another side, right? So there's these competing agendas out there. And I'm like, well, then why, if I'm one of you, why was I a reptilian? And he said that again. He said, the soul never dies. There's nothing that they can do to the soul, because the soul is part of the all.
Yeah.
You're part of the all as well.
Energy never dies.
So they are, yeah, and they're trying to manipulate that, but they cannot manipulate that. And then visions started pouring into my head, just the craziest fucked up shit of them fighting the reptilians. It looked like this being was doing kung fu moves with his. He had this energy weapon that looked like almost like a straight thunderbolt. He's doing all these. It sounds crazy for me to even say this, but it looked like he was doing these karate kicks and like killing these reptilians, and he's telling me like, yeah, we do this stuff on another plane, on another dimension, so you don't see it. And I'm like, well, then what the fuck am I supposed to do with this information? He says that your purpose in this incarnation on Earth is just to make people aware of your experiences, because it's going to come out. And when it comes out and people find out that, you know what, hey, we didn't originate from a cell, we are an amalgamation of different species genetically, but at the end of the day, it all has to do with consciousness, with source consciousness. And then yesterday, there's this thing on YouTube, TTSA, Tom DeLonge, and he's talking about all this shit. And I was like, holy fuck. I mean, fucking speak to me, man. I'm going through this shit right now. Like, you know, and I'm a nobody. I'm just like a small person that has a story. And now I'm feeling really encouraged to come out with my story, to speak on podcasts, because other people are doing it. And there's still pretty much like a stigma about this stuff. But look, I'll tell you two things which convinced me that the stigma is lifting. Number one is, last week I had a conversation with a colleague of mine. He got curious about this Joe Dispenza meditation that I was looking at while I was work. And one thing led to another. We started speaking about manifestation, positive thinking, meditation, gratitude, consciousness. And then it led to aliens and orbs. And he didn't flinch one bit. He's like, yeah, I believe you. I'm sure you've gone through it. And I'm like, look, I'm not just talking shit. Here are the photographs. Here's my evidence. You need evidence? Here's your evidence. You can see the videos. You can see the photographs with the orbs and the faces in the orbs. And he didn't flinch one bit. And he's like, tell your story. Go ahead and tell your story. So then yesterday, after so many years, I spoke to my mom and I said, Mom, I really need to get this off my chest. And my mom actually heard me out without saying that I'm demonically possessed.
What? Nice.
So this is interesting, Parsi, because I'm new into my journey. And so my experiences has been astral projection. But everything that I'm learning from everybody, it's pretty much coming to very similar, or if not the same. So this is interesting. I'm glad you came on and shared this with me. You know, in the beginning, let's go back to the beginning when you saw the first aircraft and you saw the three fingers from the aircraft, right? So what I've done in some researching is that in the beginning, going back to Roswell, where there was the surgical nurse who interviewed the first alien, and the alien's name was Errol, A-I-R-L. And
wow.
Errol was described, and I always thought, you know, because we see things on TV, right? So I always thought that aliens had, you know, all fingers and all toes, but Errol was actually described with only 3 fingers, 3 toes, on both hands and both feet. And Errol was described as not of, you know, cells, but of energy. And Errol mentioned something to Matilda McElroy. That was the surgical nurse back when, you know, the claims were the alien spaceship that crashed there in Roswell. But Ariel had told her in the beginning, had told Matilda, mentioned something which takes me back to your reincarnation when you were talking about it, that all gods became men, but not all men became gods. And this simply was just referring to how, we were all of energy, and then how we were reincarnated and we're here. So when we're now human form, right, reincarnated into a human form, it just means for some of us and for like myself that I haven't had that awakening yet. And that's why I'm still as a human form and not have made it back to becoming part of God. Somebody mentioned, and I think Tony had mentioned, I can correct me if I'm wrong, but when we talk about God, it's whoever you believe is in, what your God is, right? And that pieces of Him were apart and put out into this world to accomplish something or to do something. Basically, part of the soul. So you were talking about that, and it just, it's just kind of more confirmation for me in my journey, of what's really going on. So I'm
Yeah,
grateful that you're actually shared a lot of information for me to
thanks.
take in.
Thank you. I
Mhm.
appreciate that. Now, see how this conversation has gone from aliens to plasma craft to orbs to God, right?
Mhm.
Yep.
It's funny because at the I think at the end of the day, like, and I am not a religious person. I never actually believed in God because I've been through some experiences that I really don't want to talk about on a podcast, personal abuse and stuff. But the
Okay.
thing is, I never believed, I never had faith. And then after all these experiences, I've become so spiritual. And that's all I think about is that who are we? Where do we come from?
Mhm.
My wife thinks I'm crazy. Like, if you told the 20-year-old me that, I'd be thinking about consciousness and God and connecting with the source, I would probably just laugh it off.
Oh man, same
I,
here.
I, I, I live clean. I don't do any drugs. I stopped drinking alcohol. I mean, I have to have a clean diet with my surgery and stuff. But I think for me, having that surgery, it not only took off the physical weight, but even the spiritual weight. And this is just me putting in my 2 cents, is that when that spiritual weight came off, I started seeing with my true eyes, with my internal eyes. Um, yeah, that's pretty much my story in a nutshell. Where we go in the future, who knows? Um, but I think it's really important. And thank you guys for having a platform, for letting people speak, and respecting them, respecting their journeys, as I respect yours as well.
Yeah,
Man,
thank
yeah.
you so much. Again, I appreciate you coming on. We appreciate you coming on and sharing this. Tony's been doing his research in his journey for about 15 years, and like I said, I'm barely. And it goes back to what you mentioned about the stigma, right? When I was going through my astral projections and stuff, like, who do you come out and tell? Because people will automatically think you're crazy. And I went to a doctor, and I could just see it in her eyes that she was ready to call somebody to have me committed or something. So I didn't want to talk about that. And it wasn't until I met Tony and I learned about his journey and his experience and his studies that I was comfortable enough to say it, to say it out loud to someone else. So I'm glad that you guys are out there and sharing your knowledge with people like me who are new into the journey. So I appreciate you and everybody else on that's out here listening that has their journey and is willing to share it with us. So we appreciate you as
Yeah,
well.
and that's exactly what this platform is about. We're not trying to push an agenda, or we're not like, a media platform where, we want you to believe
Yeah.
only this, and if you believe anything other than that, then you're wrong. Like,
Hmm.
no, I mean, we're doing this for everybody. If you have a story and want to come on, please come on and tell your truth. No
Yeah,
judgment.
Thank
This
you.
is your platform.
for sure.
Thank you. I appreciate it, guys. And I mean, you'll notice that as well on Twitter. Um, there's it's very skewed. You have the positive love and lights saying all aliens are space brothers, and then the other side says they just want to kill you, rape you, fuck you, or kill you. Pardon
Yeah,
my French,
yeah,
right? But there's no middle ground. Like, I mean, you have to have discernment in everything you do and everything you think of. So and that's why I tell people is that. Um, each person has their own disclosure. Like, we've already had our disclosures. We don't need the government telling us, oh, there's craft and there's beings. We experience this every day, as in some form or another, right?
yeah, for sure.
And it's up to us how we're going to go ahead as a species and as a race when this information finally is validated by the so-called governments of the world.
Yeah. Well,
But
Percy,
thank you guys.
yeah,
Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
and
Thank you.
once again, from everybody here at the Melted Broadcast, like we said, this is a platform for everybody. Please come on and share your story. There is no judgment. And thank you, Parsi, and from everybody here at the Melted Broadcast, remember, stay melted.
People say that I'm one of the greats. I'm the one that you love to hate. Shake 'em up like a quake. Pop your feelings and turn to dispose 'em like haters I throw away. I'm forever blessed. Got the spirit that's wholly controlling me. I ain't gotta coordinate. I just sit back and buckle my bells and I'm ready to blaze in the stars of my destination. Melted broadcast, open vision. Melted broadcast, open vision. Melted broadcast, open vision.
Melted broadcast, open vision.